I'm going to give an introduction about the dkNET Hypothesis Center today. And really, I mean, the overall goal of the Hypothesis Center, and as I walk through sort of the various components, is really trying to make bioinformatics tools more accessible to the research community. As Koei mentioned, two of the core aspects of dkNET are to provide an information portal about resources to biomedical researchers, and also to provide a way to connect researchers to NIH-funded resources. And so really that's one of the primary driving factors for the Hypothesis Center in terms of providing access to tools and resources. Now, as Koei mentioned, the Hypothesis Center is part of the core resources within dkNET, and those include the resource reports that Koei had mentioned. And so the resource reports provide information about various research resources such as antibodies, cell lines, and the like. And I'll also show how the Hypothesis Center integrates with some of these other aspects. If you want to see any other tutorials or information about anything else that we might mention in this webinar, we do have a YouTube channel with a number of playlists that are geared towards various aspects of dkNET and other areas related to dkNET, such as FAIR data, for example. So in terms of how we try to help researchers, is that we provide a number of these resources that we just highlighted that cover various areas of the scientific process. From doing background research, trying to get information or previously collected data, through, for example, searching through the discovery portal. Working to develop a hypothesis, can be done, through various tools in the Hypothesis Centers. You then, work to plan your experiments, with resource reports, authentication reports to help you, begin those experiments. You are collecting and analyzing your data, again, tying into the Hypothesis Center to, link you to various bioinformatic tools. And then, when you publish your results, properly citing research resources, and then also how to manage your data. So again, the Hypothesis Center is one of these tools that, ties into, a number of other tools that we provide for, when you're conducting your research, in various stages. So one thing over the last 10 years, we've seen a significant growth of available data and online tools and resources. And that is accelerating. So, there are, on the data side, there are, number of new initiatives, collecting large amounts of data that are being made available, to researchers, online. And then, bioinformatics researchers are developing more tools that are being made available online that are, accessible by bench scientists. So, there's a need to sort of help, provide information about what's available to researchers, as they might not know what tools are available. And then once they might know about a tool, but may not have the appropriate types of tutorial information or guidance in terms of the use of the tool. And so that's one of the driving factors for the Hypothesis Center. And so the center itself is available on the dkNET main page. It's in the top 4-quadrant overview. It's in the bottom right, and that will lead you to the overview page for the Hypothesis Center. When you get to the Hypothesis Center, you'll notice a couple of areas on the screen. The first I want to point you to is actually on the bottom. So one thing that we are trying to provide, as well as the tutorials, is also some stories related to discovery through the use of some of the tools that we highlight in the Hypothesis Center. And so these stories of discovery are overviews of the actual studies and published papers that relate to tools in the Hypothesis Center. So for example, the Mouse Metabolic Phenotyping Centers, have some tutorials, and then this is an example of research done using the MMPC data, that's being made available. And so we provide a short synopsis of that, and then link you to, the papers, that are resultant, from this resource. In terms of the tutorials themselves, we have organized the tutorials not around tools specifically, but around questions that one may be asking about, how you might want to analyze your data. So on the top left of the Hypothesis Center main page is the launch point for these tutorials. When one selects a question from the drop-down list, for example, if I'm looking, for evidence for target genes, within a signaling node of interest, there'll be a set of examples that are provided to you. So we actually provide, for certain tutorials, we can provide a number of different options in terms of the specific example that might be more tailored to your research background. Once you've selected the representative example, you can then launch the tutorial itself. And so the first set of tutorials I'm going to cover are the tutorials that are built directly into the Hypothesis Center. So these are tutorials that we have created within the tutorial system that is available. And so in this case, it is a tutorial that links to the Signaling Pathways Project. So the Signaling Pathways Project is actually a core resource within dkNET and is led by Dr. Neil McKenna at Baylor College of Medicine. And SPP is an environment that really allows you to explore large number of transcriptomic and ChIP-seq data sets, and do a meta-analysis across these data points to really, investigate, potential genes of interest, to develop hypotheses around genes and signaling pathways, the tool itself. It can actually do many different things. So this tutorial will actually lead you through the specific question that you had selected. And in terms of the tutorials themselves, we do provide an overview of the tutorial. And we also link to a number of webinars. So many of the tools that we have sort of included, within the Hypothesis Center, have also presented webinars within the dkNET webinar series or have their own webinars. So we always provide, if possible, an overview of the resource through a webinar. Oops. Provide that detailed information. Now, we do provide information on what the individual tutorials provide through, description of what tutorial you selected, but also, the individual sort of learning goals that we expect to cover in the tutorial itself. So this will, identify the specific tasks that you can accomplish within the tutorial and within the resource that's being discussed. So the tutorial lesson is broken down into a number of different steps. And so each step has, its own collection of information. For example, in the first step here, you're actually going to launch the Signaling Pathways Project. But then, when you go to step 2, we start walking you through, the individual steps required to complete the task that you had selected. And so here we're actually showing, the O-minor interface and where you need to click next. But on the left, you'll notice that sort of the description of the actual step is much larger than just telling you what to click and what you need to do. And so one of the things that we're trying to do within our description of the Hypothesis Center and the tutorials is to actually provide more in-depth discussion of the various options, provide a little bit more scientific background in terms of why you're selecting certain things within the interface, really trying to do more than just teach you, how to click the various buttons, but also give you the information, and try to inform you as to why you're selecting certain values or certain parameters, or selecting, clicking certain buttons. And we think that's important in terms of the use of these tools, is that, tutorials, go a little bit deeper than, just giving you the mechanistic aspects of what's needed. At the end of the tutorials, we then provide information on how to interpret the results from that specific resource. And so again, this is something that we are providing, to help you understand a little bit in terms of what you're seeing on the screen itself. The results interpretation is a little bit more generic in terms of what we're providing, in the sense that it may not be directly tied to your specific results that you're working through, but it provides an overview of what you can expect once you've completed the tutorial. And then in addition, if there are any references, that have been cited, as part of this tutorial, they're included at the end of the tutorial. So that sort of covers, like how we are structuring tutorials for an individual resource. In a lot of cases, a scientific question that you might be interested in may require, the usage of multiple tools or resources. And, these tools and resources will then need to be linked together. And so one of the things that, you might be interested in is, for example, how one can get information about, use information derived from phenotypes of model organisms, and use that to refine a set of genes of interest, that you may have around certain phenotype that you're interested in. And so, for example, one of the integrated tutorials that we provide is for integration of the Mouse Metabolic Phenotyping Centers and the Signaling Pathways Project. So again, this is meant to provide information on how these resources can be combined. And when you go into this tutorial is sorry, my mouse is not working correctly. Let's see. Okay, so this is a interactive tutorial in the sense that we also provide some services to extract information from the Mouse Metabolic Phenotyping Centers in regards to a phenotype of interest. So when you go through one of the tutorials, it leads you through information related to a phenotype of abnormal glucose tolerance. We actually will go out and query the MMPC, return a set of initial genes, that are associated with that phenotype. We then provide the ability to download that as a CSV file and then launch into a specific tutorial for the Signaling Pathways Project that allows you to take that CSV file and then go through and examine, explore that through SPP. And so again, what we're doing here is we're trying to link you through these multiple tools and resources. And if we can, we're utilizing tutorials that have been already developed, and then in some cases, providing these interactive ways to interact with an external resource, get information to continue with the tutorial. Sorry, okay. One of the things that we've also been doing is trying to tie in some of the other dkNET resources with the tutorials themselves. So for example, here what we're doing is trying to develop a hypothesis, generate some genes of interest that may be used in developing further experiments. And so one of the things that you might be interested then in is antibodies related to those genes of interest. And so we can actually tie you directly to the resource reports. In this case, the example is for antibodies, where you can input that information, which will bring you right to dkNET resource reports around those antibodies. Again, trying to interlink the different components of dkNET through the Hypothesis Center. Now, it's impossible for us to develop, tutorials for all the resources that are out there. And so what we've also been doing is we've been including some external tutorials for resources, and those have been contributed by additional projects. So for example, the Human Islet Research Network has a resource browser that allows you to go in and look for specific data around type 1 diabetes. And so they've provided an external tutorial, but we still do provide the whole informational content around the tutorial. So each tutorial has its own information page, which has the same content as with the internal dkNET tutorials. And so that includes the introduction, links to webinars, and information on learning goals. And then you're given the ability to go to that external tutorial. And so this allows us to provide more content and also incorporate a larger number of tools. Now, in terms of other informational content that we have around the Hypothesis Center, we do have individual pages around all the resources that we provide as part of the Hypothesis Center. So for example, if you were to click on the Signaling Pathways project, that would bring you to a bioinformatics resource overview page that has very simple information about what the resource is, who can use it, an example of what types of questions it can answer. And then there are boxes below that provide specific use cases, examples that you can follow, and then also links to additional webinars that might be available for that resource. There are a number of ways to get to that information. Also at the bottom of the Hypothesis Center, we list core resources that are currently available. And then there's also information about available tutorials and about all the resources. So if you click through to the resources, that will give you a page with all the resources that are available currently. And the tutorial listing will provide you an overview of all the tutorials that are currently available. And so you can expand each of the main questions to see the specific examples that are provided. And you can also filter by resource. And so, one of the things, that, we want to stress is that, we really are looking for, feedback from the community as to, what online tools, resources, we should, consider incorporating next. We already have, a number in the pipeline, but feedback from the community as to, what resources you think might be valuable to be included in the Hypothesis Center. Suggestions of use cases. What have you struggled with, in terms of using some of these resources, and especially the multi-resource tutorial. So as you've worked through yourself, have worked through some of these online resources, what sort of multi-resource tutorials do you think would be useful, to others? So things that you have struggled with. Make it easier for the rest of the community. If there's information on tutorials that already exist, so if you have a resource with tutorials, please let us know. And also stories of discovery. If there are any tools, that we have where there's an interesting published paper, that you think we should include, contribute those as well. And also, if you're a resource developer, we can assist with developing, the tutorials within the Hypothesis Center, within our tutorial environment as well. And to get in contact with us, you can, contact us at info@dkNET.org. So that's sort of a little overview. I'm going to, let me see if I can, my keyboard is not being happy right now. So let me get dkNET up here. Okay. So do a little walkthrough itself. And so when I've selected, so when you look at the questions that I mentioned, we have a number of different questions that you may want to start with. And so the Hearn example, is data related to my disease of interest. That will bring up, the Hearn tutorial on the resource browser. If you're looking for example, volcano plots, for genes of interest. So this is provided by Avi Mayon's group, in terms of their development of various Appyters. So Appyters are a way to wrap Python notebooks in an online user interface. If we go to that tutorial, we have the webinar from Avi Mayon's group, and that's what it will link you to. The Appyter resource itself. Go through to that. So the Appyters, we link directly then to the Appyter that you can run through that resource itself. Okay, so if I'm looking at some of the other questions, you'll notice we've started out with a set of specific questions, and we look to expand those through incorporation of additional tools that we have, but also from suggestions from the community. If I were to go to the SVP tutorial that I had given an overview of before, when we go through, show you a little bit more of the tutorial itself. So once we launch signaling pathways project, so this is going to be launched in a separate window, and apologize for my slow internet right now. We go through the individual steps. It will actually lead you through each of the things that is needed to be selected. And again, we do try to provide, so for example, in this fourth step where we're providing, the transcriptomics pull down for the omics category itself, we do provide then additional information about, why you're selecting, the various drop-down menus. And for example, for a multi-drop-down, we'll provide information on sort of the sequence that's needed. So again, we should try to provide, a fully and detailed description of what needs to be done. In terms of the integrated tutorial. So again, we have a number of different so for each of the questions, as I mentioned, we have multiple sort of examples that we can go through, and so this is a slightly different example than what I had provided in the overview. But here, we can copy the example into the box. We can then do the search against the MMPC, and what you'll notice here is that there are a number of returned results from the MMPC and also the IMPC. You're then able to click on this download CSV file, which will download the file to your computer, and then we follow up and you launch into a separate tutorial. So this is launching into the signaling pathways project, and then the link here is the link to the tutorial itself. Okay, and so then you've been launched into the secondary tutorial, and it will provide again the steps that are required, leading you through the information on what to do. And so, for example, here, this step in terms of the gene list, this is different than the prior tutorial. And so this will lead you through how to use a gene list in terms of, exploring, the genes and signaling pathways within the signaling pathways project. So let me, oops. Okay. So I think, that is sort of the overview I wanted to give, of the Hypothesis Center. I'd happy to answer any questions or, even, discuss various suggestions for how to, make this more useful to the research community.
Hi, Jeff. There's a question from the chat from Vicky. So I think it's coming from the previous, you used the integrator. So
right.
Can you select more than one phenotype and see a list of genes involved in certain thing and then something phenotype? Yeah.
Yeah. Currently, we have provided the tutorial for selection of one phenotype. And you could, since you're downloading gene lists, and if there are related phenotypes, you could do some of that yourself. And so, there's ways to potentially find sort of, if you download the two gene lists, you can do the intersection of those.
Okay, and there's another question from the chat. So is there an example like in the tutorial to teach how to interpret the result?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so if I go back to for example, the SBP tutorial, if I go down to the end of the tutorial, we do have a description of the results you will be seeing, and so we do try to provide a sort of a simple explanation of what is actually represented in the results interface.
Okay, there's another question. So if there are multiple tools for one use case, how do hypothesis center decide which tool is best to use?
A lot of times it isn't, and currently, we've been doing sort of individual, we've linked, for example, the MMPC and SPP together, but it's done in a modular way. So for example, in this case, as I showed before, you go from, the MMPC, you get your gene list, and then we link you to a specific tool. We can provide sort of multiple modules that you can follow on in next steps. So we could, in future tutorials, also link to different tools, right, in terms of doing the tutorial itself. And that's something that we can explore, but it's a little bit easier in terms of, the overall flow of a tutorial if it is, guides you through a sort of single use case, and just in terms of understandability. But it is possible for us to branch off into multiple tools if needed.
And are there any more questions? You can also unmute yourself if you have any discussion. Okay, I think I don't see other questions in the chat. So if the audience, if you have any more questions, please feel free to send us an email after the presentation, and then I will forward it to Jeff, and we can also answer through the help desk at dkNET.org website. So,
yeah, and again, I want to stress that, as we just released the initial version of the Hypothesis Center with the initial sets of tutorials. And so what we are going to be doing over, the next months is, we are developing, more detailed tutorials, for various resources. And we're also looking, to include, tutorials, for other resources that might be out there that you think would be useful for the community. So please get in contact with us and let us know, what additional content, that you think we should make available. Because we really want to make sure that, the Hypothesis Center, that we can really tie into, a broad collection of tools, that are, available to the research community, and really, to help make those tools, more usable by the community.